So your girls aren't, I mean, maybe they're starting, maybe Zoe with running is starting to enter this arena of athletics, but I found that even more challenging as a parent to navigate the world of fueling my kids when they were training. And then especially with Stella, my one and only daughter, how to fuel her training. And she's in a weight-based sport, right? Jiu-jitsu and judo, you've got weight classes. It was easy. I think it was easier for us because we were kind of trailblazers in the sport of youth jiu-jitsu in the Northwest. And so we could just call the promoters and be like, hey, listen, the weight class is going to be fluid. And instead of having preset weight classes, why don't you see who registers and then divvy up the classes based on who registers so that kids aren't
instead of
trying
having
to make
kids
weight.
cut weight. Yeah.
Right.
Because we didn't want that to happen.
Right.
But now Stella's in judo training, trying to get to that Olympic level. And I guess a couple of things. Number one, it's difficult in my experience. I didn't have anybody to talk to about how do I do this? Me having come from already an eating disordered past. And now I'm trying to tell my daughter to eat well.
But not too much.
Because I don't want to impose that.
Right.
Well, and just as a MMA coach too, I mean, women have a whole nother set of problems when it comes to
Challenges, not problems, babe.
Okay.
Opportunities.
I was thinking Jay-Z, but anyways, but no, like it would like I didn't understand, and so I'd have like a female fighter who was like on weight. We'd be checking it every practice. And I'm like, okay, good. Like, and we're water loading, getting ready to cut, and then the next day she comes in and she's like 5 pounds heavier than the day before. I'm like, what the hell? Like, what just happened? And then Kisa would pull me aside and she's like, and I'm like, oh, okay, I get it now. But
it's a real thing, like water retention and
just calorie restriction in women, like it'll affect men, but it affects women so much more deeply, quickly, harder to unravel. Like once that you've gone down that kind of overreaching, overtraining deal, it's just woven into the biology there. I haven't done a ton on that. We coached a young woman who was part of the South African Olympic team, and she ended up not quite medaling, but she just missed it in sculling. But weight class sport, super anaerobically demanding, and had disordered eating past, and so it was so hairball coaching her on that. Like it was kind of like one and done. I never wanted to do it again, and it's tough. It's really, really tough.
Stella spent, we've had her with some nutritionists over the years, and the worst experience that she had, I'm actually very grateful that she had, because she was old enough and mature enough that she could reflect on it, and still young enough that I don't feel like it's set deeply. But that was when it was U.S. Open in Florida, and she was registered for 52 kilos, and for whatever reason, Stella grows every June, and she grows, June to July, she grows dramatically. And when she was younger, I would always notice it because, her clothes, like her shorts are just a little bit shorter, like she grows taller, not just bigger, but taller. And that was the year that she had first started her cycle, and but because, she's training all the time, because she's still young, because whatever, it's up and down and not very consistent. And we got to Florida and she was overweight. And, here I am. I don't even know how old she was at the time. 16?
Sounds about right.
Yeah, 16, I think. It was a couple of years ago. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to. Okay, so we're going to do these baths. And, we're coordinating with her. And Travis is like, well, she's just got to sweat it out. And he's back to like old school MMA, like you just got to be tougher than the scale sort of mentality. But
I cut weight with her one time, and I said I will never cut weight with my daughter again. It's so easy when it's like you're fighters, and then when it's your 16-year-old daughter, and she's like crying and can't feel her hands and stuff, and she's in the bath, and
she's too young to cut weight, and yet it's a weight-based sport.
Right.
And there's a dramatic difference between 52 kilos and 57 kilos and 63 kilos. Well, the long story short, she missed weight by, I think, a half a pound after dying for 18 hours. And they ended up, through a series of fortunate events, a spot ended up opening up and they moved her up to 57 kilos. And she crushed it at 57 kilos. I don't remember. I might just be exaggerating for the sake of the storyline, but she did really well at 57 kilos. And she was able to get her water back, and she was able to, not only rehydrate, but also refuel before she stepped on the mat. And when we came back, she said, I never want to do that again. I will never cut again. She's now competing at 63 kilos. And she just told me, yes, when we were at Western Outdoor.
Jury's still out on my end on the 63 kilos thing.
Oh, yeah. Travis and her Kalispell coach both think 63 is too big. But let me tell you, Stella's got tits and ass. Like, she is stacked like Travis's mom. She's built just like Travis's mom and your sister. And what she told me was, she said, this is really, I'm more of a woman than I've ever been, meaning I've got the curves. She said, my cycle's consistent and predictable, relatively so. And she said, and for the first time ever, I understand that my value has nothing to do with the numbers on the scale.
That's huge.
And I was like, oh, thank God. At the age of 19, to hear that, knowing what I was doing at 19, and also seeing worldwide how much females struggle in combat sports, weight-based combat sports. I mean, I'm sure there's other sports that women struggle in, but those are the ones that I pay attention to.
Rowing's a big one.
Rowing
Rowing, because it's a weight class sport. Yeah, it's brutal. I don't know if it's as gnarly as combat sports, because you have the whole like head trauma component. You're dehydrated, and then you don't have that, the cushioning and everything. But sculling's pretty rough because of the weight class element to it.
And so each person,
the whole boat, I think.
Well, it depends whether you're single or multiple people. Yeah.
So your South African athlete, was she single on her?
Yeah. So it was, she'd live or die by making it work. So yeah. With your own daughters, right? They're not yet to that point. They will be. And whether they're in a weight-based athletics or a non-weight-based athletics, it's just different, right? It's different for female athletes. It's different for teenage female athletes. And again, there's just not a whole lot of information out there and not a whole lot of support, at least that we've found. We were, again, fortunate enough, I think George was Stella's best nutritionist.
George Lockhart.
And his whole team. And one of the first questions he asked was about her cycle. And so that's, for me, that was kind of a litmus test, like, he understands, he gets it, that it's going to change. And then also that the diet was changing and it wasn't strict about, absolutely 100% eliminate everything. He was very much like, well, how does that make you feel? What does that do for your performance? How are you sleeping? And she had to kind of track all these things.